This happened a few years ago in my old one-person flat. I just had a strange feeling at some point that something just wasn't right for a few days. Like, I was sure that food in the fridge was less than I put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor. Stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat. Or so I thought. One night, I woke up at around 1 a.m, I think, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, I was sure that I woke her from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat too, I decided that I should probably take a shower, so I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and I enjoyed my shower. But a few minutes in, I heard the door move. Now, I never really close it, but still, it never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain, and I saw a shadow against it. And a look at my phone confirmed that somebody was definitely there. Since I could clearly see a reflection in my screen that showed that somebody was standing next to the shower curtain. It took me everything that I had not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off the holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I'm still kind of impressed at my quick thinking, in fact. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way to hot, and a few seconds later, steam was raising and the water hurt my feet flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind. It was a woman. She screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it closed behind me. A little later, she started to bang on the door, but the door didn't give way. Thank God for German quality work, right? I immediately called the cops, though, and went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife, just for safety. And I immediately felt my throat closing up when I saw that it was missing, and realized that there's really only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to have been the former person living in that flat and was evicted after not paying rent. It seems as though that she made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work and sometimes at night, and it's also possible that what woke me up in the first place was her. And honestly, I don't even want to think about that. Ever since then, though, I have always insisted that the locks are changed when I move in to a new place. So this happened when I went camping. 2 things in one night, too, both involving the same friend, both involving my need to go to the bathroom. So at around 10 p.m, I really needed to take a dump. I left our site to use the restroom, which was about maybe a quarter of a mile away. It's pitch dark, and as I'm walking, I see one of my friends who was with us walk from a path leading to an unused site onto the main path. This unused path was a good 50 yards away from our site's path. My friend has a very noticeable and peculiar gait, a way of walking, so I knew immediately that it was him. At multiple points, he turned around and asked, "Why are you following me?" Always a good 40 or so feet ahead of me as well. I would reply, "I literally told you guys that I was going to the bathroom," and question, "Why? Did you come from a different site?" And then he picks his pace up, and eventually I lose him in the darkness. I get to the restrooms without seeing him, take my dump, and upon returning to my site, where he of course is, I start asking why I'm being screwed with. Everyone denies my friend even left, and so that was weird, but okay, so they're messing around with me, no big deal. 3 a.m. rolls around and I wake up needing to pee. No need to walk to the restrooms this time, I'll just walk off into the woods a bit. But as I walk back after taking my leak, I hear the distinct sound of a tent zipper opening. In the darkness, I can tell that it's my friend. Then I can barely see it, but definitely hear him zip it back up. As I get closer to the tents, I see him more clearly and he walks a bit. He goes to light a cigarette, and I can see his face in the flint strikes of the lighter, even clearer when it manages to catch. He lights his cigarette, takes a puff and says, "Can you hear me?" I say, "Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?" Again, much louder this time. "Can you hear me?" I'm like, "Yeah, are you trying to wake everyone up?" He kind of shakes his head at me and then just turns and walks towards the cars, maybe 30 feet away from him. Thinking that I'm being messed with again, I go to follow, but lose him behind a car, and I turn the corner of it, and he's just nowhere to be seen. I'm annoyed at this point. He thinks that he's so funny, right? So I go back to his tent. It's still closed, but when I get there, I can hear him faintly snoring inside of it. This immediately freaks me out because I don't know what it was exactly that I saw, but it looked and sounded and walked just like my friend. I spoke to him quickly too, but he denied that he ever even left his tent or went through the woods ahead of me. I still scratch my head when I think about that night. So this happened a couple of years ago when I was 13 and my brother was 11. My parents had gone out and thought that it would be better to leave me and my brother home alone, so that's why they did, and they left, taking my little sister, age 6, with them. Me and my brother were all the way down in our basement, which is where we had our video games set up, so the two of us were just downstairs playing Mario Kart on the Wii or something. We had the home phone in between us, just in case one of our parents called. About an hour goes by and the phone starts to ring. We look down and the caller ID is our uncle's. We decided to just let it ring out, and how our phone worked is that it would ring about 5 times and then stop. So, first ring, second ring, third ring, and the phone stops ringing. My brother doesn't pay attention to this, but I realize that the only reason for it to stop like that early is if somebody else in the home picked it up. But we were supposed to be home alone. I get really suspicious at this, and my paranoia gets the better of me. I take my brother with me, and we go upstairs to see that the phone is still there, but there's still a phone on the 3rd floor in my parents' room too, so we go towards the stairs, and what we saw chilled us to the bone. There was a man in his late 40s, early 50s, is all I could really tell, because the second that we saw him, me and my brother, we just screamed and ran straight out the front door and go straight to our neighbor's house. We immediately tell them what happened. They proceed to call the police and our parents. They come fast, and I don't know what was wrong with this guy, but for some strange reason he just never left the house. He just stood there, and the police arrested him from what I heard, and he was placed in a mental hospital, but that's all I know. To this day, I really still don't know what to think about it all. But one thing that I do think about often is that what would have happened to me and my brother if my uncle didn't decide to call that day. So this happened to me when I was in high school. I was at my friend's house at the time, who lived in an apartment building. She had a neighbor who lived upstairs and was a few years younger than us, who we hung out with when I visited my friend's apartment. On this specific day, my friend's neighbor mentioned that she actually had a Ouija board and asked if we wanted to use it with her. We both agreed, as I personally didn't think Ouija boards were actually paranormal, and I honestly thought that it was a myth. We went into the garage area of the apartment building and put our fingers on the planchette. For the first few hours, nothing really eventful happened. Eventually, though, we had movement on the planchette and started asking questions to this spirit who would answer us. I honestly forgot who, but somebody asked if the spirit was trying to communicate with any of us. Interestingly enough, too, it spelled out my name. I was skeptical, I admit, and I thought it was just one of my friends messing with me, so I asked what its name was. It then spelled out my grandmother's name, who had died like 6 months before. I started to get a little bit uncomfortable at this, as my grandmother's name is in another language, and my friend did not know this language, nor have I ever told them what this name was. They wouldn't even know how to spell it either, which really weirded me out. I asked what my grandmother wanted, and she started spelling out URGR, and then the planchette started going in weird circles and even going off the board, and was not spelling out anything that made any sense. So I asked for further clarification, and then it just said, "You are great. This will be important for later, so keep it in mind." Anyway, I just thought it was just moving it weirdly and then said goodbye. A few days later, though, my grandmother's husband, my grandfather, suddenly passed away. It was really unexpected, too, as he was in great health, and it was right before Christmas, and everyone was just so excited for Christmas. As I was at his funeral, I remember sitting there and thinking about the Ouija board, and that's when it hit me. When the Ouija board, or my grandmother, initially tried to spell out something that started with GR, I quickly realized that grandfather starts with GR. But then the planchette moved around just weirdly when my grandmother couldn't spell out the rest of the word, as if maybe something was stopping my grandmother from completing the word and trying to warn me. The next few months, though, were just absolutely terrible, as I started blaming myself and was convinced that I somehow contributed to my grandfather's death by using this board. It got to the point, in fact, that I became suicidal, and the scary part is, my thoughts, I felt as if they weren't really mine. Now, I know that this is going to sound really weird, but it felt as if something or someone was trying to lead me to take my life, as they were really dark. I can't really explain it, but I admit that it might have just been guilt. I'm not too sure, but I felt like something was just watching me all the time, and I felt a really strange presence in the next few months after using this board. There's also the fact, too, that the night of when I used the Ouija board, I was in the bathroom and I was underneath some lights, and I just had a strange feeling and felt like I needed to walk away. And right when I did, the lights just shattered, and it would have injured me for sure if I was still standing underneath there. I eventually confessed to my mother about the Ouija board experience, and right when I did, I just felt a giant weight just come straight off my shoulders. The negative and dark thoughts were slowly disappearing, and I started to not feel the dark presence anymore when I overcame these thoughts. However, I was still wondering if this spirit that I contacted to was even my grandmother in the first place. I also wondered if I was imagining this dark presence and the dark thoughts that I had. I honestly thought that maybe I was going crazy. Fast forward though, and I was at an overnight event at my school, and another friend brought a Ouija board. I decided to use it one more time with this friend and find some answers, hopefully. And at one point, the Ouija board said that it was trying to contact me specifically. When we asked who it was, it then started spelling out DEV. We started to panic a little bit, but then it spelled out a word that I forgot. I dismissed it though and thought that it was nothing again, but my friend decided to look up the word. A few weeks later, she told me that apparently the word meant devil in another language. It was definitely confirmed to me then that it might not have been my grandmother who was contacting me the first time. There's also the fact that there may have been something that was trying to get to me and it didn't have good intentions. To this day, I am still sort of convinced that this spirit only really tried to warn me about my grandfather passing so that when he passed, I would feel guilty. By feeling guilty, I was more vulnerable to this spirit's influence to the point that I would almost take my own life in the end. Obviously, I don't know if that's actually what happened. It's impossible to know, right? But it's really the only explanation that I have for everything that happened. So, to be quite blunt about this, my dog is pretty stupid. She started barking at me at like 12 a.m. the other night to go outside, and I obliged. I'm in the Utah, Colorado mountains area, and I've never really heard of any paranormal stuff here, so this is sort of doubly freaky. We step out onto the porch. It's that weird, eerie quiet when a predator is near sort of thing, and I don't think much of it because the only predator around here is coyotes, and they tend to keep near the street and away from the house. I figure my dog has to use the restroom, so I sweep the yard with my flashlight. It's the night after a new moon, so naturally it's pitch. No eye shine, no weird movement or anything. But she's reluctant to leave the porch after begging to be let out, which was weird. She just sort of stays near the stairs. There's a sort of road or a path or a trail around our house that's wide enough for a car to go through, and also has a sort of woodshed at the end for winter. So I shine my light down that way. If anything's going to sneak up on us, it's probably going to come from that direction, because the wood piles are like 7 foot high. While she's messing around, I keep my light in that direction and notice that it's hitting something. Whatever it is, too, it almost looks like the moon coming up through the trees. It's bright, but not glowy bright, more like a soft reflective light. And at first, I don't really think much of it, until my idiot brain remembers that there's no moon tonight. And then the dog winds herself around something and gets caught up as she practically throws herself at the door. I unleash her, leave the leash, and I throw myself inside too. Obviously, I have no idea what this was. I mean, it didn't give me the I'm about to die sense or anything, but it definitely alarmed me and it wigged my dog out as well. Also, I don't know if this is just a coincidence or bears remark, but I also saw a weird ball of fire streak overhead in broad daylight a few weeks ago, if that helps at all. What do you guys think it could be, though?